Hello, Garland Nixon here. And so we finally had Israel do, I guess, whatever they want to call their response to Iran. And lot to talk about that, what actually happened, and the discussion that's going on as a result. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here. And after a great weekend in New York City, hanging out with a lot of anti-war people and all kinds of stuff like that. Let's see if I can possibly get my computer. I streamed to several platforms at one time, and if I have like a video playing on of another platform at the time, kind of gets me freaked out a little bit. You can imagine you're talking and there's like a video of you running on Rockfin or Rumble or something, and like a second, 2 seconds behind you say this that's coming up. That would kind of let's just say be a bit confusing. Okay, let's talk about what happened with Iran. Thanks everybody for showing up at the peace events, and thanks everybody for watching on the YouTube. On YouTube, it was great, man. Jimmy Dore, Russell Dobular, Scott Ritter, Danny Highfog. I mean, it was fantastic. Anyway, let's move along. I better make sure. Wait a minute. Let me turn down my phone just in case. It always likes to ring, and I yawn, and everybody says, "Okay, Garland, your stream is complete." Okay, so what happened? Let's go back to my thoughts on this prior to this incident, right? Okay, for those who watch my stream already know what I said, but I'll review it briefly for those who are not regular observers of my content. So what happened was, a while back, I looked at this, and in the through the lens of the comments and the technical observations of Andrei Martyanov, who, he wrote a book about how the West lost the arms race, how the U.S. lost the arms race. And when I say the West, since the U.S. empire controls the rest of the so-called West as vassals and colonies, expendable colonies, and might as well just say the U.S. We were in an interesting dynamic. Israel was threatening, as though they were a dominant military power against Iran, but the battlefield, when I say the battlefield, the theater of battle, maybe that's better, revealed that they weren't. I mean, they were so far in the conflict, Israel's been quite adept at bombing civilian areas where there is not any significant air defense, and that's been the mainstay of their battle plan, right? They bomb a lot of civilian neighborhoods, and they say, well, Hamas or Hezbollah or some other terrorist organization is there, and it's left up to us to determine. You can believe it, you cannot believe it. I'm not saying it's true or false. I'm just saying that there are a lot of people in the world who interpret what they're doing as direct attacks on civilian infrastructure, and there are statements that are made that could lead one to that conclusion by the Israelis and the Americans both. Okay, so Israel has also engaged with various adversaries on a military technical level, such as Yemen. They've taken incoming missiles and drones from Yemen that have hit them successfully. The various, we'll call them, since this is what they call themselves, resistance forces, Syria and Iraq, have fired drones, missiles, etc. That some have had success, some haven't. But keeping in mind that these are non-state actors for the most part, that these are militias that may have support from state actors, but in and of themselves are not state actors. It's surprising that they've had any success at all, but they have. They've been from various distances just poking Israel from this direction, from that direction, from that direction, hitting them in kung fu, what they call it, the crane, kind of technique, where you got the beak here and you strike from over here, and you strike from over there, you strike from there, right? You strike your strike from different positions, unorthodox. Keep your adversary guessing. They don't know what you're going to do. It's not a tradition. Like Michael Spinks used to be a fighter, right? He didn't do anything right. He was unorthodox. He punched from the wrong directions. He was on the wrong foot. His weight was off balance, but he would defeat often he would defeat his adversary because they were accustomed to sparring against a traditional orthodox boxer, and they would lose to an unorthodox boxer. So there are various unorthodox fighting styles that the strength of the fighting style is its unorthodox techniques, if you want to call them that, which makes it difficult for the opponent to guess based on their training against orthodox techniques. Makes it difficult for them to guess what they're going to do. I think that's what we're seeing with Israel, is the West trains against what they see as orthodox fighting styles, and you have a combination of symmetrical and asymmetrical warfare, and from different both non-state and state actors, and that's been very, very difficult for them to figure out. The timing is off. When are they going to get hit? From what direction? From who? Then there's public relations losses. If you take a punch from Yemen, if they get a drone through and they hit somewhere in Tel Aviv, which they have, then Israel has to explain why they don't have the technical and military wherewithal to stop a drone from this poor little country who shouldn't be able to hit them, right? So they've been taking public relations losses, and they've been taking hits. I'll put it like this. When Israel gets hit by a drone from Yemen, it's a dual loss, because they get hit, whatever target they hit. I mean, a Yemen drone or missile could land in the middle of a stinking field outside of Tel Aviv, or it could hit a building. Sometimes it may do either one, but it's a massive PR victory for the resistance forces, because now Yemen says, we struck Israel, and everybody says, hooray, Yemen, who supports the resistance. And people look at Israel and saying, you can't stop these people. This is your air defense system. They lose, and lose again. So they've been battling various unorthodox fighting styles, but then they've been able to use that as an excuse and simply reinterpret the unorthodox strikes as terrorist attacks. Yes, they're unorthodox, therefore they're terrorism, right? The argument being traditional flying an F-16 over and dropping a bomb on somebody, that's orthodox, so it's fair. Groups that are non-state actors firing missiles in the night, one or two or a couple of drones, those are unorthodox fighting styles, so that's terrorism. It's war attacks versus terrorism. Okay. So what Iran did a while back was a traditional, twice now, a traditional, shall we say, orthodox attack, orthodox in a way. Traditional military orthodoxy is, I fire a bunch of missiles at you, and your air defense attempts to stop the missiles and or planes, whatever the case may be, right? What we're seeing is Iran, and I believe to some extent, Russia and Ukraine, are developing a new type of attack. They have developed it, right? And that is to thwart air defenses. And it's quite simple. You've got very expensive air defenses and very expensive missiles. So what I do is I can overwhelm the air defenses with drones, with dud missiles, with missiles that have various multiple warheads that release and go, basically. So I basically flood the zone, as it were, and do things to fuse to confuse and overwhelm the computers on your air defense system. And therefore, bottom line, I can now get through your air defense system. Whatever you want to call it, however you want to call it, it's basically this. The resistance / non-Western forces have figured out how to defeat traditional air defense systems. Okay. So bottom line is they are now consistently defeating Israel's air defense system. And I believe that Israel is running into a similar problem as the Ukrainians, and that's this. It's because the Western defense missiles are extremely expensive, and difficult to produce. And so there is a limited number of them. And the ones that are produced are extremely expensive. Again, because why are they expensive? Because they're not built by the state. Iran builds their own, Russia builds their own, China builds their own, the state builds them. There is no administrative cost and there is no profit to be made. So they can make as many as they want as cheaply as possible. Okay. And I would imagine there is some collaboration amongst those forces on what they learn in Ukraine battlefield, what they learn wherever in the battlefield, in the Middle East battlefield. So you have a collaboration of forces and you have government built machinery, which is cheaper. So they can make more of them. They can make them quicker. Notwithstanding Israel's asymmetrical defeats, Iran then demonstrates that they can use an orthodox, a traditional attack, state actor versus state actor. From that's what I mean, traditional, a state actor versus state actor. They can use new techniques, flooding the zones, electronic warfare, multiple warheads at multiple speeds, things of that nature. They can use that to defeat Israel's air defense system. So now we have a dynamic where Israel's militarily, you can argue that they're naked. What does that mean? That because there's a very significant meaning to that. Because they're naked. Ooh, did I put somebody says Iran fires? Oh, okay. I can change the name. It says Iran fires at Iran. It should say Israel fires at Iran. Whatever. I'll change it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me look at my live stream. What's it say? Iran fires at Iran. Iran fires at Iran. That's hilarious. Okay, that doesn't matter. I'm going to change it because at least I've got the thumbnail right. So, I'll change it. That's the great thing. Okay, so let's continue. What we're looking at is Israel being naked. They're naked. They're militarily naked. And that means that the only thing that stops Israel from being really destroyed is the hesitancy, right? The grace of their opposition. Now that we see that they're militarily naked, that means that if Iran wanted to, they could wipe them out anytime they want to. They can strike them any way they want to. They can hit any targets that they want to. And because they have allies and all over the place, what Iran could do is this. They could target their aircraft systems, their anti-aircraft systems everywhere. They could send in missiles. They could force them to fire their anti-aircraft systems, and those missiles could then follow in by the literally thousands, target those anti-aircraft systems, blow them up, leave them completely naked. Hezbollah, Yemen, all of them could flood them. So Israel's right now existing by the grace of whatever you want to call them, the resistance bloc, their adversaries. We'll call them their adversaries. There's some people that I've had people, why do you call them the resistance? Well, that's what they call themselves. I got to call them something, but let's go with the adversaries, whatever. So as we look here over here a few days back, Israel decides we're going to fire at Iran. Right. So apparently there are two things going on there. Right. One of them was the kinetic attack. The other is the public relations moves as a result. It appears to me, based on everything that I see, based on everything that I can read, all the data that I can gather, and I'm going to give you this. I don't know that I'm right or wrong. This is my interpretation of the events that occurred. Israel somehow fired a number of missiles at Iran. We have reports, credible reports, that Israel or the United States notified Iran that they were going to fire and maybe the type of targets. If that's true, there's a lot to be learned from that, isn't there? If that's true, that indicates that one of two things, that Israel / the US is actually concerned about the damage that Iran could do in a retaliatory strike, which I'm sure they are. No doubt. Why wouldn't they be? They're naked, right? Iran could just say, we're going to hit, you got 5 power plants there. We're going to hit 4 of them. We're going to hit 3 of them. We're going to hit the 2 of them that provide 48% of all the power for Israel. They could, and Israel, if Iran was to smack their power plants, then Israel could no longer prosecute the war that they're. How you gonna go move forward with a war when you got little or no power in your country? They could take out their oil and gas production. They could take out, really very, very. I'll put it like this: at will, Iran could take out the critical infrastructure of Israel, and really, they wouldn't have to kill a lot of people. They wouldn't have to do a lot of damage to cities or anything to really cripple Israel to the point where it's not even a credible country anymore, right? If they take out their desalinization plants, if they take out their power plants, is Israel a credible country? What are they going to do? They got people run around struggling to get water with no power, right? So Israel's naked. They're in deep and serious trouble. So they fire missiles. Maybe they told Iran, maybe they didn't. There are reports of that through intermediaries. It certainly appears as though Iran shot most of the missiles down. Maybe a couple of them got through. It seems like I saw a video online. Was it the latest video? Was it from there? I don't know, but I did see video supposedly over Tehran. And you could see missiles, incoming missiles going across the sky. And you could see what appeared to be anti-aircraft missiles shooting them down. You could clearly see that in large numbers. So I'm going to interpret it this way, that Iran did, in fact, intercept a great deal. I would say the majority, probably by far, the Israeli missiles. Which gets back to exactly what I predicted in the very beginning. And this is not to blow my own horn. This is to simply say it was kind of obvious. And that was we talked about it with Andre Martyanov and Scott. The Iranians have a significant air defense system. They have a networked integrated air defense system. That air defense system appears to have been upgraded by the Russians. Apparently, there are rumors of S-400s and S-300s, in which there's rumors of electronic warfare. I don't know. Additionally, Andre Martyanov said that, the Russian space-based intelligence and their radar, long-range radar, would be able to see any planes taking off, any missiles fired far, far, far before it reached Iranian airspace. And that the Russians would be able to notify the Iranians, would be able to give technical data to the Iranians that would assist them in defending themselves against the strikes. So it appears that you had a combination of Iran and Russia, not to denigrate Iran's integrated air defense system, but certainly, two heads are better than one, right? So it appears that the combined efforts, I believe it was the combined efforts of the Russians and the Iranians, have made Iran a very, very difficult target to strike. And there is a greater lesson to be learned here, and that is that NATO's weak. NATO's really, really weak, because NATO doesn't have the wherewithal to the industrial wherewithal to produce air defense missiles at a high clip, which means if they would get in a protracted military confrontation with Russia, with Iran, with North Korea, with China, right? Okay, maybe out of the box they could fight somewhat. I'm sure they have significant offensive capabilities. However, it wouldn't be long before they'd be in deep trouble, before they'd be overwhelmed. And not only that, it seems to me that now the Eurasian-led bloc knows their weakness, which is to flood the zone, as we talked about, so that in the event that there were a great power conflict, shall we say, that very early in the conflict, that the Eurasian bloc would flood the air defense zones of NATO, take advantage of that, and NATO would be in deep and serious trouble in a hurry. Not to say they wouldn't be able to do some damage, but they'd be in deep and serious trouble in a hurry, which means, of course, their only option would be to go nuclear, and that would end it for us all. That would be their only option, because things look bleak. It appears to me the U.S. empire has lost the arms race by a significant level, or on a significant level, and that is going to be, to me, what I guess, dictates future uh, diplomatic differences between the U.S. and its and U.S./Israel and its adversaries. Because let's face it, the U.S. has utilized its strengths to dominate the planet, right? Sanctions, of course, BRICS going on, and the Eurasian-led bloc saying, okay, we got to find a way around these sanctions. It's going to take a while, and we got to find a way around these sanctions for everybody. BRICS is working on that. The U.S. empire has dominated the planet also through bases and military confrontation and threats. Certainly now, as I said, the drones, cheap missiles, flood the zone strategy seems to have negated that advantage. And now a terrible thing for the U.S. empire is that there's one thing to wolf and say you can fight. There's another thing to have to fight and then demonstrate that you can't. Right. So they have, for some time, they have crowed about their military domination. Now they were put in a position where they had to demonstrate their military domination, and it was demonstrated that they don't have it anymore. So what do? Threaten people? We'll come get you. We'll beat you up. We'll blow you up. We'll do this. Countries aren't going to be afraid. They're going to say, well, hope you don't do it. But if you try, we're ready. And we got a lot of big brothers to help us out. So we'll see what happens there. But I do think that the U.S. does not have the means of domination for the planet that it once had, which puts the U.S. empire in a very interesting position. If all you can use is nukes, I mean, let's face it. We've talked to many people who have said, experts who have said, let's say the U.S. goes to war with China or Russia, very shortly they're going to take they're going to lose aircraft carriers. They're going to have bases turned to rubble. They're going to really be put in a compromising position early. And then the U.S. will then likely lean towards nukes. And at that point, it's over. But here's what that means. If you think about it, that means the only thing you can do is swallow a suicide pill. The only thing you can do is be a suicide bomber. Your only option is to say, if you do something I don't like, I'll kill us both, right? Murder, suicide. That's the only option the U.S. think about this. This is I need to find a nickname for the U.S. empire, but think about it. Militarily speaking, the only option the United States has to dominate the planet now is a murder-suicide pact. Is to say, you better do what I want. Why? Or I'll kill us both. Think about it. It's like the crazy husband who tells his wife, if you leave me, I'll kill us both. That's where the U.S. empire is. The crazy boyfriend that says, you stay with me or I'll leave you both, knowing that she don't want to stay. That the reason she wants to leave is because you're the crazy boyfriend. The reason she wants to leave is because you're threatening her life and you're threatening everything. That's why she wants to leave. She already knows that. And you say, if you leave me, I'll kill us both. And she's like, I kind of knew that. Which means what? I hate to say it, her only option is to kill you first. If a man says to a woman, if you leave me, I'll kill us both, her best option is put a bullet right between his eyes, right? That's what I would argue. Her option at that point is, I know either one of us is going to die or both of us is going to die. I think it's going to be you. Think about this. If somebody said, Garland, if you don't do what I want, I'll kill us both, I'd kill him. I'm a man of peace. Right? Exactly. But as my mother used to say, one of the days the good Lord's going to call me home, but I ain't homesick. Right? So if you're going to threaten to kill me, you got to go. So I think that's what the resistance forces, that's what the Eurasian-led bloc, a lot of it understands that the only thing the U.S. is the crazy boyfriend saying, you're going to stay with me or else. And they're saying, I don't want to stay with you. Well, then I'll kill us both. And I think they realize that I got to kill you. And I think they understand that there's various ways to do it. For instance, I could poison you. I could shoot you. I could push you off a cliff. I could, or I could form BRICS. Because what they understand is this whole thing is economic anyway. Why does the U.S. want to dominate the planet? So they can go to all of these global South countries and steal their bananas and their chocolate and their cacao, their their lithium, you know what I mean? Their nickel, their cobalt, their uranium, on and on and on. That it's about money to you. That your domination is about money. You feel like you can't economically dominate if you don't militarily dominate. I think was it Paul Krugman or Thomas Friedman that once said, you can't have McDonald's without McDonnell Douglas. He knew the truth. Wall Street knows the truth. The truth is they use the CIA and they use intelligence and military to dominate the planet. They claim to have diplomacy, but let's face it, every U.S. embassy is nothing but a CIA outpost, and everybody knows that now. So the resistance, Eurasian-led bloc understands that they're going to have to act economically, and that the U.S. where's the weakness, right? The weakness of the U.S. empire is its economic instability in an economic system that is, let's face it, on its way out already. All they got to do is stand out of the way and watch the U.S. neoliberalism drive our economy off a cliff. They're doing that already. So what we saw now, this was in the Middle East, is very, very important time. I think that was an exclamation mark what happened with Israel and Iran, right? Because we saw in Ukraine, but the U.S. had some plausible deniability. Well, it's not us. It's Ukraine. It ain't us. And we're not going to give them everything they want. Why? But if we gave them everything they want, they'd surely defeat Russia. Think about this. Part of that discussion that says we're not going to give them everything we've got. If we did, they beat Russia. And all of these people in the news saying, well, the U.S., if Ukraine wants to defeat Russia, all we got to do is give them ATACMS and all these other things. And if Ukraine loses, it'll be because the U.S. didn't give them everything we had. Because if we gave them everything we had, they'd surely win. What does that imply? It implies that the U.S. still has the military technological wherewithal to defeat Russia, doesn't it? It implies that if we gave them everything we had, they'd win, which means that we got enough stuff to defeat Russia. We have the military technological ability to defeat Russia. We're just holding back from Ukraine. And then there's an argument over whether we should or shouldn't hold back from Ukraine, right? So there had to be a testing ground somewhere. Well, that testing ground was the Middle East, because clearly the U.S. is not going to hold back from Israel. We're going to give them everything we have. In fact, what did we do? We recently put the THAAD system in there, Terminal High Altitude Air Defense System. But even when it was in, everybody looked at it and said, that ain't going to save Israel. They already got David Sling, Iron Dome, all of these other, euphemisms and metaphors for biblical defense, and they ain't doing them any good. And they looked at the way that the technique that Iran was using to flood the zone and say, here's the problem. You're using the same technology and the same strategies to protect Israel. From Iran. Iran has already demonstrated that they can defeat that strategy. They've already demonstrated that they can defeat that technology with a superior strategy and with a minimum technology when it comes to a lot of numerous drones. We don't have to have high-tech drones as long as we got enough of them to flood the zone. Now we have fewer high-tech, high-speed missiles, but we don't need as many. We flood the zone with the cheap stuff, then we hit you with the good stuff, and we got plenty of both. Is that what you really want to do? Okay. So that's where we are. Ukraine, they were still able to imply that they had the top technological wherewithal to defeat the Eurasian bloc. In the Middle East was where the rubber met the road, and people could see whether they did or not, because everybody knew they weren't holding back. So now Israel's attacking Iran. You already know what are they going to use? Some cheap drones or whatever. They're going to fire missiles, whatever they got. And it was a horse brushing off horseflies, right? It was pretty easily defeated by Iran. I'm not going to say something didn't get through, but it certainly appeared as though they had a lot of difficulties. Now, Israel came out and said we had 100 F-35s. I find it hard to believe. Maybe they did. If they did, that's even worse. It's even worse if they sent 100 F-35s and their attack was defeated. That means that they went all out and they got defeated. But I don't think they did. I think there is some credibility to the arguments that they pulled their punches. And the fact that they pulled their punches shows that there's not the U.S. empire doesn't have the political um, strength and desire to go all out against Iran. They understand that, hey, we got an election and that's going to cost you big. They understand what they'll do after the election. We can talk about that in a second. They understand that the world's watching and the world's like, look, man, you screw this up and none of us are going to get oil. And our whole economy is going to collapse. They understand that if the economy collapses, there will be, uprisings in the U.S. And that's it for the whole neocon project, because you can't have the neocon project if the people are in the streets with pitchforks and torches because they're paying for, $14 a gallon for gas and their economy is in total collapse. So there is some, not a lot, some rationality in foggy bottoms, some rationality, right? And some fear that, holy crap, if Trump wins, we're screwed. And they're probably right to some extent. So my point being, and let me add this, I think some people missed an indicator that came from Trump. Trump did put out what I will call he put up a flag to those people. And here's what he said. Here's what I read. I read somewhere that Trump said he's open to pardoning Hunter Biden. Did say that, right? What's that about to me? He's sending out a message. I think I could be reading it wrong. I think the message is, look, we need to end this. That what you guys have pulled out every punch to go after me, and I'm going to win. And I'm going to win. I know I'm going to win. I think that's where Trump is. I don't know if he's going to win, but I think so. I think you can make that. I would bet that way, but it's possible anything can happen for numerous reasons. But I think Trump is putting up an olive branch to some extent to say, look, it ain't as bad as you think. If we play ball a little bit, I may be able to back off. And I think, Trump always wants a deal. It wouldn't surprise me if Trump comes in and says, I'm not going to spend all my energy going after Hunter Biden and trying to smite my enemies. I got other things to try to accomplish. You can agree with him or not, but I do think that Trump, as much as he may be pissed and he wants to go after people, let's face it, Hunter Biden's a small fish. He really is a small fish. Would you want, if Trump was in, whether you're a Trump supporter or not Trump supporter, would you want the new president to come in and spend all of his energy punching at Hunter Biden, of all things, as a crackhead? You know what I mean? Come on, trying to get back. They're bigger fish to fry. So I don't know that Trump goes after Hunter Biden. It wouldn't surprise me if he tries to just get him out of the way, drop all that stuff, fire a lot of people in the DOJ, and go on to other whatever the hell else is he going to do. Some that I'll agree with and some that I'll be horrified by. Let me add this, since we're talking about Trump. There are numerous reports that Bibi Netanyahu much prefers Trump, right? That he wants Trump. And I think that's true. I think Netanyahu feels as though Trump will come in and say, do whatever you want. We're 100%. We're going to send all of our troops. I don't necessarily think that that's true. I think probably this is a different Trump. And I think based on Trump and the people surrounding him, while they are diehard Zionists and while they are a pain in the neck, and you and I may roll our eyes at them, I do, again, think that they don't want to get bogged down in a war in the Middle East. I don't think Trump wants to come in and immediately get bogged down with the worst possible war. After all he's talked about that he's going to think about this. Trump comes in and says, I'm going to fix the economy. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to stop the warmongers and the neocons, blah, blah, blah. You can't fix the economy if gas is $27 a gallon, pal. You can't fix the economy if the Straits of Hormuz is closed and there's missiles flying all over the oil fields, right? Trump's no idiot. He understands that. So I do think that Trump understands that in order to, I could be wrong. Again, as I always say, I do think Trump understands that in order to move forward with his broader agenda, he's going to have to turn down the volume in the Middle East. I think he understands that he's playing he's walking a very tight line where he has to certainly give the pretense that he's supporting Israel, and he probably will support Israel, that he has to continue to some extent to support this Zionist regime that he probably wants to. But I think Trump understands that Trump's a bit of a narcissist, you know that, and he wants to come in and say, "I'm the guy that saved the day. I'm Superman." And I think he understands that if he comes, because he recently said, "I'll stop all the wars." Let me see if I can find that, something about I'll end with these wars all over the place. Let me see. There's an article right here. Let's take a look at that. I think this is part of this conversation that we need to have. Former U.S. President Donald Trump promised not to send Americans to fight and die in countries they have never heard of while addressing a crowd in Pennsylvania. Speaking at a rally on Saturday, Trump claimed he's the only one capable of preventing an all-out global conflict, arguing Democratic rival Harris would get us into World War III guaranteed. She's grossly incompetent. To make her president would be to gamble with the lives of millions of Americans. Sons of daughters will end up getting drafted to fight in a war in a country we've never heard of. Trump vowed to, listen to this, in his nomination acceptance speech early this year, Trump vowed to, quote, end every single international crisis that the current administration has created, particularly the Ukraine and Gaza conflicts. He never offered specific plans. He won that by supporting and financing, quote, other people's wars. The U.S. is increasing the likelihood of World War III. Last week, Trump claimed on his Truth Social platform that, quote, if Kamala gets 4 more years, the Middle East will spend the next 4 decades going up in flames. Your kids will be going off to war, but I will not send you to fight, to die in a foolish, never-ending foreign war, he told the crowd on Saturday. So, you know, this is what Trump says. Who the hell knows what Trump will do? But I'll put it like this. I do think Trump, you know, as I said, he's a bit of a narcissist. He wants to be the king. He wants to be the guy that does everything. He wants to be the guy that fixed everything. Trump, you know what he wants to say. Nobody's ever seen anything like this. Everybody said you couldn't do it. They said, no, Trump can't do it, but I'll do it. I can do it. Everybody says to me, Trump, you're great. You can do it. I can do it. Well, if he can do it or not, probably not. But I do think that based on what's going on, there is at least a possibility that he may try. We'll see. There's a possibility that he may try. His rhetoric is different. The people around him are different. I don't know if he's going to win. I don't know if he's going to try to change anything, but we have a different rhetoric. And I think that's, in my opinion, probably the reason he'll win. And not to mention Kamala Harris has some real serious issues. She has some issues of, there are people who question her competency due to a number of her recent interviews and some of the things that have happened during that. All right. So that's where we are in the Middle East. We're at a position where regardless of what the U.S. and Israel tell you, everything that I just said, they understand. Militarily, diplomatically, they understand. They're at a stalemate. So all they can do is keep fighting. That's all they can do. Continue to fight, which is costly. It's going to cost them lots of money. It's going to cost Israel lives. It's going to cost them support around the world. If there's any left, nothing benefits them. There's nothing they're getting out of this, right? So I think that may create a dynamic where there is a opportunity for some kind of a de-escalation. I'm not going to say diplomatic resolution, but maybe a de-escalation. And I think the place to watch is the Israeli government, to watch the rhetoric of the Israeli government, because the Israeli government is unstable. It's not stable at all. I mean, look, I don't know if you've been paying attention over the last 2 years, where they had 3 or 4 governments and prime ministers in 3 years. They're like, this is the case throughout the U.S. empire. Look at Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, now Keir Starmer. I mean, and all of them are hated throughout the U.S. empire. All of their vassals are unstable politically because they're not looking out for their people. And if you don't look out for the people in your country, if you don't look out for the political, your constituents, you will have political and cultural instability. So I think there's a possibility, and not only is there a possibility, that there's probably a conversation being had, number one, about some kind of a de-escalation in the coming weeks, in the coming week, just prior to the election. And they better do it quick. Here's why. Because if they come out Monday, Friday, Saturday, and say, oh, we've got a ceasefire, we've got this, we've got that, okay, people will be like, yeah, I heard that song before. Seems to me I've heard that song before. They'll be like, every single time you need something, every single time another state or there's something going on, we hear, the US says we've agreed to a ceasefire and Israel's in it and along. And then Israel's like, yeah, no, we're not actually. And so then that's that. So I think that if they're going to be able to make some kind of a political move to say we got a ceasefire, a temporary ceasefire, we got whatever, they got to do it within the next 2 days. The closer it gets to the election, if they ain't do it by Tuesday, maybe Wednesday at the latest, who the hell's going to believe it? Everybody will be like, yeah, that's just a political move to last till next, the end of next, till the day after the election. People will be like, we know you're going to say you got it and you're going to turn down the volume. And the day after the election, you're going to put your foot on the gas. Israel, the Netanyahu government may feel like they want Trump. So they may try to do something outlandish leading up to the election so that can make things look bad for the Biden administration and assist them in getting Trump. We've already discussed, the potential for what Trump may do. But so the possibilities are the U.S. announces some kind of a ceasefire or cessation of hostilities within the next few days. Whether or not people believe it, that remains to be seen. Israel could take some kind of an outlandish action over the next couple of days to deliberately infuriate the Democratic base and help Trump win. That's a possibility. The talks for diplomacy could begin to get the echoes of diplomacy could begin to get louder, simply because it's now been demonstrated that Iran has the military technological advantage over Israel, which leaves Israel with no other options except to keep killing civilians. And this whole business about we want to drag the U.S. into a war with Iran could fall apart. And may have fallen apart because they understand. And I think Israel understands, yeah, we want to bring the U.S. in so we can have the big fight. But hell, we're using U.S. defensive capabilities now, and it ain't working. So if we bring the U.S. in, what happens if we get defeated and the U.S. gets defeated? And the U.S. understands what's going to happen if this thing blows up and we get bases blown to smithereens all over the place. What are we going to do? And Israel gets out of hand. What are we going to do? I think it's a very dangerous time between election day and January 20th. There's no guarantee we're going to make it through there. I think that the probability of escalation in Ukraine decreases proportionately with the instability, both diplomatic and militarily in the Middle East, because I think the U.S. understands although Joe Biden, we can fight 2 wars, 3 wars, we're the most powerful ever. Joe Biden knows they can't. He knows they can't. Right now, they can't even really fight one. And Russia's banging. I mean, they're doing what they do. They're hitting Ukraine. Donald Trump is somewhat realistic about that. Trump says, look, Russia's a war machine. They just keep grinding away. He understands. I mean, look, he's got people around him. I think he's got RFK Jr. and Gabbard around him who have his ear. And I think I think Trump understands more than he says he understands about the Ukraine conflict. Again, this is not a pro-Trump or pro-Harris or negative Trump or negative Harris thing right now. It's simply, these are my observations. You can disagree. The chat can say, no, Trump doesn't know anything. He's an idiot. Oh, Trump's a warmonger. He's going to do. You might be right. I'm guessing. We're all guessing. A lot of things that are happening now that may appear to be policy related are political simply because we're a week out or so from the election. So what these Trump, Harris, whoever are saying and what they'll do could be 2 totally different things. But I think the chance for de-escalation comes from what has Russia said? Russia has said, we're willing to talk, but it has to be based on the realities on the ground. In other words, don't ask us to take a deal that a loser would take when we're winning. We're winning. We're going to have to take a winner's deal or no deal. We're not going to take a loser's deal. Don't come to us and ask us to give up anything, to put up with anything, to, to say, okay, we'll take this or that. We'll take nothing. We'll take everything we want, or we'll keep fighting, right? I think that's where Russia is. I think that Trump, let me add this, that Trump recently said, I read where Trump recently said that he would think about, I read, whether it's true or not, basing some kind of deal on the Minsk Accords with no U.S. troops. Of course, Trump ain't thrilled about sending U.S. troops nowhere. Based on the Minsk Accords, here's what I think. That's a starting point for the Russians. It's a starting point for the Russians. But I do think one of the Russians will require some things. I think ultimately you can get a deal with the Russians. People think, oh, the Russians don't trust. Yeah. Trust but verify. I think they can get a deal with the Russians, but I think it will require Ukraine taking a haircut. And I think it will also require the presence of Russian troops and or the troops of Russian allies, of countries like maybe North Korean troops, maybe Chinese troops, maybe Iranian troops, right? There will maybe peacekeeping troops or something in Ukraine. Ukraine, forget it. They have to say, we'll never go in NATO. They have to put in their constitution that they won't, whatever's left of them won't be in NATO, et cetera. And let's not forget the denazification part. So I think Trump wants a deal. I think in saying we can base it on the Minsk Accords, I think that he's signaling to people, whoever he needs to signal to, the Russians, I don't know. He's signaling, I'm open to your security, your request for a security deal. That I understand that this is bigger than simply what's going on there. And because if you remember, the Trump people started off with, one of these neocon kind of deals. Yes, we'll bring them into Ukraine into NATO, and you can just keep the regions you have. I think they understand that ain't going to fly. And so now I think they're stepping a little further over the line, saying, let's look at the Minsk Accords. Here's what all that means. That means we're willing to move. That we're not hard. We're not hardened like it can only be this, or this, like the neocons right now. That we're going to listen. And if you say that ain't a deal, we'll say, okay, we'll step a little closer to you. What about that? Now, I think that means that that's how you get a deal, right? That's how you get a deal. You understand your position. I heard Trump say recently on Joe Rogan, when they said, what do you do? He says, I can't say everything that I would do. I can't tell you everything I would offer or everything I would ask for. I'm paraphrasing, because then I couldn't get the deal. That's not unreasonable to say, look, I want to get a deal. But if because in sales, I used to be sales, and I used to use the word bullets. When I come in and make a deal with you, I've got so many bullets in that I can fire. One of them is, my manager said you can take up to 10, 15% off. That's something I can use. Another one is, my manager said you can give them the first 2 months free. That's something I can use. My manager said you can give them up to 2 free cameras if they get a full camera system, right? I got all of these things. I'm not going to come out and fire them all. I'm not going to come out and say, take the deal and I'll give you 2 free months, 10% off, and blah, blah, blah. I fired everything. I'm empty. I'm going to offer you nothing for the deal and see if you take it. If you say, yeah, it looks a good deal, but it's a little much, tell you what I'll do. Why don't we do this? If you sign today, I'll give you 10% off. Yeah, but I don't know, blah, blah, blah. Well, that area's not covered very well. You need more cameras there. I'll give you 1. See, I got 2 free cameras. I'm going to give you 1. Then I'm going to talk some more. Then, and eventually, because every one of those is a bullet I'm firing. And when I fired all my bullets, I'm empty. I don't want to come in and fire them all. I'm going to offer you this. I'm trying to get the deal. And then I'm going to hold up something when I come back later. And when I come back later, I got a camera and I got 2-3 months I can give you. So we talk, you don't take the deal. And I say, well, okay, we make an appointment. I'll come back next week on Tuesday at 4 o'clock. I get back Tuesday at 4 o'clock. I've talked to my manager. Here's what we'll do. We're up to 7 cameras and you want 8, right? Yeah. Tell you what we'll do. I'll give you 8 cameras. And I still got another deal. I still got 3 months free. See what I mean? You don't want to fire all of your rounds and be out in sales. You want to hold on to something, and eventually you can maybe get the deal once you've done everything, right? And so when Trump says, look, I can't tell you, Joe Rogan, all the things that I would do, or I couldn't get the deal, that I think that's what he's saying. I got a number of bullets in my chamber. If I fire them all now, the Russians will be sitting there like, okay, take notes. What did Trump say he'll do? This, and this. They start off asking for all of it. If you tell them, if I start off and say, I'll give you 2 free cameras, I'll give you 3 months and 10%, and I say, these are the things I can give you, you'll say, great, that's the baseline. Let's start off with those. I got nothing else to offer. I'm out of rounds, right? So it sounds to me when a person says that they do want a deal. When they say, hey, man, I can't tell you what I'm going to do. I talk to these people. They really do want a deal. Whether they can get one, who knows? And so I think a combination of the pressure that's been put on the U.S. empire in Ukraine, the military/technical weakness that has been revealed, and the political heat creates a dynamic where maybe you can get a deal. Let me add one other. Let's look at one other article here. Let's go to TASS. The others are TASS, which is a Russian news agency. Hamas opened for deal with Israel, right? It is possible if Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu vows to fulfill what has already been negotiated, right? High-ranking Hamas representative, let's not forget, the Russians have met with Hamas numerous times in Moscow. They're very tight with Qatar, who is very tight with in Iran, etc. So they got the inside scoop, and they talked to these people. Hamas representative said that the movement is, quote, open for a deal with Israel on the Gaza Strip amid the resumed negotiations on the ceasefire and release of hostages. Hamas confirmed in a statement, our demands are clear. We can strike a deal if Netanyahu vows to fulfill what has already been negotiated, right? It remains unclear whether Badran's words are reaction to Egypt's proposal for a 2-day ceasefire in Gaza in order to exchange for Israeli hostages. So here's the bottom line. Hamas sources told the Ashark News TV channel that the group would prefer to reach a comprehensive settlement treaty instead of separate agreements at times of Israel. So what are they doing? Hamas is going down the same road. They're now saying, look, dude, they see an opportunity. And politically, from public relations, they want to always tell everybody we want to be the good guys and the reasonable guys, right? So Hamas comes out, this happens, and I think they read the same thing that I read. Look, Israel's kind of down and out. They're down on one knee here, right? Things ain't working well for Israel in any way, shape, or form. So Hamas comes out through Russia, and Russia, who pretty good diplomats historically, 20% of Israel's population are Russian, right? So Russia has some, both, I put it like that, as they say, the same thing that'll make you laugh will make you cry. Russia had some issues in really being confrontational with Israel because they got a lot of Israelis or Russians, and they got to deal with that diaspora, right? But that gives them inroads on both sides, right? So now they're saying, look, Israel, you're taking on water. You tried your confrontation with Iran, that fell flat. Hamas says they want to talk. Politically speaking, you need to get something done. Why don't you be the hero here and say, okay, we'll take a deal. You've done enough. So it's a smart move by Hamas. Israel's, I don't think the leadership of Israel is either rational nor in a position to, well, in some ways they're not, in some way they are. I'll put it a different way. They're not rational from a military perspective, accepting their limits. Bibi Netanyahu is rational from a personal perspective, understanding that there's a potential for him to go to jail if he, if his government falls, if this whole thing ends. So he kind of needs the war to keep going in order to keep him from having to face the music for the legal issues that he's facing, the legal jeopardy that he's facing. So we got some lights flashing here. We got some lights flashing all over the place. There were red lights flashing. Everybody was waiting to see what happened with Israel striking Iran. Would they hit Iran hard? Would Iran take a punch? Would Iran be able to defend themselves with their both static and newfound defensive capabilities. I think a lot of questions were answered. We know that Iran defensively is sound. We know that Israel offensively has some holes in their swing. We know that Israel defensively has some holes in their swing, gigantic holes in their swing. They can't hit a curveball, shall we say. And we know that there are now forces crying out, seeing this as an opportunity on so many levels, saying, okay, now we can make a move. By the way, I will very shortly go in and change that Iran fires at Iran thing. Thank you. I love you guys in the chat. You're always bringing my stupidity to my attention. Okay. Well, I don't see any super chats, which is fine. Who knows? They might have demonetized me by now, for God's sake. I don't know. No super chats. That's certainly fine. Let me see. Do anybody I need to speak to on Rockfin? New. And I think that's that. All right. So I will finish it up by thanking everybody for coming out this weekend. Thanking everybody for supporting the channel, reminding you that because of the shadow banning, etc., it would be of a great help if you A, hit the like button, if you B, were to share this on all your social media platforms. And last but not least, Patreon is an option. Buy Me a Coffee is always great because you can just go to buymeacoffee.com. All you to do, $5. That's it. What Buy Me a Coffee is $5. And how many coffees do you want to buy? And of course, just like Patreon, you can become a monthly subscriber. That would be great. PayPal, all of the stuff going sliding across. Also, rockfin.com. Follow me there. Follow me Telegram. You can see Garland Nixon. Follow me on Rumble, just in case they demonetize me, throw me off YouTube, all of those things. Follow me on Facebook, etc. Thank you very much, everybody. Certainly appreciate it. Those who can contribute. Those who can't, share on your social media platform. And have a great day. Peace. I'm out.